In this lesson, we'll configure Dreamweaver to be able to synchronize our local root copy of our website, which we've been working on up until now, with a remote copy of our website on a web server external from our local network. And to configure Dreamweaver to be able to communicate with a remote location, we're going to edit our website, which we did when we first created our website in Dreamweaver. And underneath the pull-down on the Files panel, you'll find the Manage Sites command. When you bring up that command, it'll present you with a dialog which lists all of the websites currently defined by Dreamweaver on your machine. In this case, we only have one, so that one is selected by default, and I'll click on Edit. And we're back looking at the Advanced tab on the Manage Sites dialog. And what we want to view is the category Remote Info. Remote Info allows us to give information to Dreamweaver that Dreamweaver can then use to access a remote location on the internet. More often than not, when you're communicating with a remote web server, you're going to use FTP, or File Transfer Protocol, to transfer information from your machine to a remote host. FTP standing for File Transfer Protocol, much like HTTP, which you can see before any website address in the URL field in your web browser. HTTP standing for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. FTP, unlike hypertext, which is intended to be read by somebody inside a web browser, FTP is intended for moving files around over the internet, and that's about it. So now that we're looking at this dialog, we would input the credentials for our web server that would allow Dreamweaver to communicate and upload and download files from and to that location. For this example, I'll just make up some credentials. If you have a real domain from a hosting provider for your own website, this would be the place to enter that information. In this example, you might have something from your hosting provider that looks like ftp.totaltraining.com, and more often than not, you must specify a host directory. In other words, what directory on the FTP host with whom you have an account will your files reside within. Often this will look like something like users/username. Here we also have the ability to enter our login credentials, such as John Smith, and whatever the password is for this account. If this was a real set of login credentials and I click on Test, Dreamweaver will present me with a message that tells me that it was successfully able to communicate with my web server. Since these credentials are fictional, Dreamweaver is trying to communicate with the Total Training web server and not getting too far. Since I know that these are fictional and this will go nowhere, I'll click on Cancel. But ideally, you saw a dialog that said Success. For now, I'm just going to click on OK. You may get a warning saying that the cache will now be recreated. Click OK. I'll be talking about this in just a moment. And then click on Done on the Manage Sites dialog. If I look over on the Files panel, I can see that there is an icon which looks a bit like a plug. When I click on that icon, that allows Dreamweaver to connect to the remote host using the host credentials that I just provided to Dreamweaver through the Manage Sites dialog. Also, there's a button called Synchronize. If I click on that button, it presents me with a dialog that allows me to tell Dreamweaver how I wish Dreamweaver to go about transferring files from my remote copy to my local copy and from my local copy to my remote copy. Dreamweaver does this by keeping track for you of who updated what file and when. This is referred to as the site cache, C-A-C-H-E. We use Dreamweaver to make the other kind of cache that we all want. But we let Dreamweaver keep all the information about our files and maintain its cache along those lines. And using these options, I can tell Dreamweaver to synchronize my entire site or only the files that I have selected in the Files panel. And I can tell it what direction I want it to transfer the files, put everything, get everything, or get and put everything, depending on what file is newer than the other. I could also tell it to delete anything from the remote server that is not on my local copy if I deleted some files that I don't want anymore. Now, since we know that the credentials that I put in this example weren't real credentials, the next step won't display properly. But if you've put in real credentials and click on the preview button, you'll be presented with a dialog which allows you to confirm the get and put and delete commands which we're telling Dreamweaver to execute on through this dialog.